Welcome to Vancouver Business Network, where entrepreneurs learn, network, and grow. I'm Roger Killen, the organizer. Our weekly workshop for entrepreneurs is brought to you by TELUS Business, the fastest and most reliable pure fiber broadband network in Metro Vancouver. Our speaker is Louise Lee. Louise learned how to fix dysfunctional teams in the United Kingdom. Her company, Louise Lee Coaching and Consulting, now helps business teams transform from dysfunctional to high-performing. Vancouver Business Network members and most welcome guests, it's now time for you to put your hands together and give Louise Lee a warm welcome.
Good evening. So it's really good to be here. Thank you very much to Roger for the introduction and also to Vancouver Business Network for having me. So good evening to everybody here live in the audience, and also good evening and hello if you are watching online. Tonight we will be talking about leadership. So this talk is called How to Be a Great Leader, Be the Leader Everyone Wants to Follow. So first of all, let's get a show of hands in the room here today. You answered this question maybe, but who sees themselves as being a leader? All right. So just for those of you watching online, just so you know, about 75% of the room raised their hand today. So first of all, I really want to acknowledge you all for raising your hands and saying that you are a leader, because being a leader is not easy, as you probably know, which is probably why you are here tonight. So being a leader takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of commitment, but it also takes a lot of self-discovery and a little bit of self-sacrifice. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on today. So right now, would you be willing to come on a journey with me to imagine something?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So let's imagine this. Imagine a world where waking up each morning inspires you and you're able to be and do your best every day. Does this sound good to you?
Yes.
All right, turn to the person next to you and say, I'd like to live in a world like that. So when it comes to leadership, many entrepreneurs don't actually think they're leaders all of the time. In fact, some of the entrepreneurs I've come across will actually say, well, Louise, I work alone. That doesn't qualify as me being a leader. Some of you may recognize this image as being, yep, that's pretty much my day-to-day life. I work on my own in front of my computer. That's me running my business. Believe it or not, many of my clients actually do not identify themselves as leaders, but they know that being a leader is absolutely crucial to what they're here to do in the world, be it as an entrepreneur or as an employee, as a parent, or as a student. So today we're going to have a look at how to create impact through leadership. Because after all, you are each here to make a difference in the world. So when we look back and reflect at the end of our life, when you're looking back at all that's happened, all the people that you've touched, your impact, your legacy, you want to know that you did all that you could to make the world a better place. That's why we're here. One of the things I love about the people I get to work with is that they are passionate about making a difference to as many people as possible. That's one thing they all have in common, and I get the impression that you have that in common with them too. So being a great leader actually helps you reach more people and make a bigger difference. So I invite you to open your mind to this question for the rest of this talk, which is, how could great leadership be a way for you to leave your legacy to more people? How can you really make a difference in a meaningful way? And if you're struggling with dysfunctional teams, how can you use great leadership to get your life back? First, let's bust a couple of myths about being a leader. Do you want to know what they are?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. Myth number one, you are either born a leader or you're not. Have you heard of this one? Yeah. Have you heard of some people saying, oh, I'm not a natural leader? Or, oh, you know, leadership's not really for me. Can I share a story with you?
Yeah.
When I was young, believe it or not, I was actually quite quiet and shy.
No way.
I know, it's unbelievable, isn't it? Absolutely. I was one of those people that you really liked talking to at parties. You want to know why? Because I was the kind of person who would just focus on asking you questions about yourself. And the reason was I was shy. I didn't want to talk about myself because, to be honest, I didn't think I had anything important to say. And as a result, I thought, well, you know, I'll just ask people about themselves. So it made me very popular at parties, but not very good in terms of my own kind of self-confidence and self-worth. I kept myself to myself, didn't speak very much, and I was very much the child that was seen but not heard. So you can imagine, when I was promoted to my first leadership role in my early 20s, I was terrified. Oh, I can feel the shudders right now. Like many people, when I was promoted into that role, I was promoted because I was good at my job. But I didn't know how to manage or lead people, especially in a typical corporate environment. They just didn't train me on something like that. On top of that, I was now responsible for doing my job and some, and I was also responsible for a team of people, human beings, and their performance as well. You can only imagine I was stressed and overwhelmed. I wasn't looking after myself. I fell into some bad habits, and I certainly was not being the best version of myself every day. I was not doing a good job leading. And you know what? I knew it at the time. You know how you know when you're not doing a great job? Yeah. You're letting down your team and you just, oh, God, I was so scared of losing my job. And I had a bad case of imposter syndrome. How many of you identify with imposter syndrome? Yeah, it is a real thing. So one sleepless night, it basically got to the extent where I got out of bed and I thought, this has got to stop. There must be another way. So I did what it took to get myself back on track. I read books. I went and did training. I did courses. I did seminars. I spoke to people. I learned from people. I observed people. And I made a ton of mistakes. I invested long, hard years learning the skills it took to become a leader that could successfully lead a team. Ultimately, I went on to successfully manage multi-million-dollar projects, turn around departments of 60 people and more. But you know, when I received my first award for teamwork and leadership, it was actually really humbling because it wasn't that long ago that I remember how badly I struggled to even know how to work successfully with people who didn't think the same way as me. So, in fact, I've now studied personal development, leadership, and relationships now for well over a decade. During this time, many people have been drawn to me and asked for my support. Enough people have approached me that I actually decided some time ago to dedicate my life to helping a lot of people overcome the same problem. I'm sharing this with you, not because I want you to know that I've been called the best boss ever, but because I want you to know that if I can do this, you can do this too. I just don't want you to have to struggle the way I did, and certainly not for as long as I did. You just need a system, some structured support, which we're going to talk about later on. So that's big myth number one. Are you ready for big myth number two?
Yes.
All right. Big myth number two, leadership is only for managers. Well, you know how they say the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they actually don't have any? I don't know if you've heard of that. If you think of some of the greatest leaders of our time, who comes to mind? Maybe Martin Luther King Jr., maybe Nelson Mandela, perhaps Mahatma Gandhi, Franklin D. Roosevelt. There you go. Winston Churchill. Some of them weren't, in fact, all of them weren't your typical corporate leaders. But you know, they made one hell of a difference in this world. And in fact, their legacy excuse me, leaves an impact on people and actually transcends their own life on this planet. So great leadership can lead to changing the world for the better. And when we choose to turn away from it, we actually end up giving away a lot of our power. So as you can see, leadership comes in all sorts of different environments and in different forms. So let's talk about an example. Why is it do we encourage our children to join sports teams and group activities, things like that? Well, it's not just about learning the actual skill of playing the sport. We encourage children, young people, friends to do things like sports and team activities because we know they will learn so much more. Things such as teamwork, how to play well with others, and how to deal with adversity, failure, as well as how to deal with success. We encourage our children to do these activities because they will actually learn key skills that are crucial to getting through life. We hope that they'll get that side order of life skills that comes with learning how to play basketball, football, soccer, and also along with that fun experience of actually learning how to play a sport and stay active. I remember a time when I was at university in England. I realized relatively early on in my degree that I didn't actually want to pursue the subject I was learning beyond university. So I wrote to my father about it, because this was slightly pre-email. This dates me, but never mind. I wrote to my father about it. And, you know, he wrote back and he said to me, Louise, it's okay, because you're not at university necessarily to learn the hard knowledge. The most important thing you can do at university is to learn how to learn. And that was when it hit me, that side order of life skills. So one thing I encourage you to do as you go away from this talk is to think about what side order of life skills can you learn when you order up your entree. As a result, I stuck with my degree. I got it in physics, by the way. And I actually went on to use a lot of those key skills in my everyday job. Everything from problem solving to analytical skills, critical thinking. You can now start to imagine how that pieces together in life. So do you see how there's an opportunity to learn in every situation? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. And how about volunteering? How many of you in this room volunteer? So for those watching online, about 60% of the hands went up. So why do we volunteer? It's often because we feel passionate about a cause, but it's often also because we want to help others, because we can. In fact, some of the most amazing leaders I have ever met have been through volunteering. It's not necessarily through being paid to lead. And that just again goes to show that leadership does not just come in the form of corporate, of management. Leaders are everywhere, which means you can lead anywhere as well. So for me, I learned this lesson not in the classroom, not even volunteering, but through music. I learned it through performing on the violin and the piano, which I started to learn at a relatively young age. Playing as part of an orchestra literally lets you hear how everyone coming together towards the same vision is greater than just the sum of its parts. It is really quite magical. Combine that with opportunities that I was lucky enough to have, which was to lead orchestras in all of the greatest concert halls in London and to tour with youth orchestras around Europe. You can imagine how, as a young person, that really did show me and demonstrate that leadership could really come in all forms. So how do we do it? How do we become great leaders that others really want to follow? Do you want to know one of the secrets?
Yes.
All right. You can't lead others until you lead yourself. Leadership is not a job title. I think we've just discovered that, and that's pretty clear. Leadership is a way of being. It's about being the person who sees the potential in others and supports them in nurturing and developing that potential so that others may rise and shine. It's about being the one who is willing to sacrifice time and energy so that others may gain. That is what leadership is about. It's a universal skill set that can benefit all areas of your life. And, you know, you can't do this. You can't ask others to trust you unless you trust yourself. You can't be honest with others unless you are honest with yourself. And you can't ask others to be vulnerable and share with you unless you can be vulnerable and share with them. So it really does start with the leadership of self. In other words, you. Now, you may already be leading yourself, which is great. In fact, I overheard conversation just this week about leading oneself and how important that is. But you're here today for a reason. And then it might be because you know there is more to it, that there is more that's possible and that you can do better and be better. Well, the trick to get started is by knowing where you're at, knowing your limitations that we all have as human beings. Let's say this circle represents everything there is to know in the world. Absolutely everything. Okay? So let's say that this wedge of white represents things that you know. So, you know, things like how to brush your teeth, how to tie your shoelaces, you know, calling your parents on their birthdays. Don't forget to call your loved ones on their birthdays. It's very, very important. You know, stuff like that. Okay. So this slice of white represents what you know. Then there's the other stuff. This slice of yellow. There's the stuff you don't know. Okay. So this could be things such as landing a rocket on the moon. I assume do any of you know how to land a rocket on the moon? Okay, just checking. Yeah, okay. I thought I heard something there. So the yellow slice are the things that you don't know how to do, okay? But you'll see that's not the whole circle. So what else is there? Yes, exactly. The rest of the circle represents what you don't know that you don't know. You don't even know it exists. But there is a whole world out there of knowledge, of things, of people, of experiences that we don't even know about in our conscious mind. So everything else in that circle represents what you don't know you don't know. And that is where our blind spots are. So you know when you're learning how to drive and a driving instructor is always telling you to shoulder check. Why is that important to do? Blind spot. Because what happens if you don't check your blind spot? Accidents. Exactly. Exactly. But here's the thing about blind spots. Unlike in driving, when you can do a shoulder check, in life, blind spots, by the sheer nature of them, are not things that you can actually see on your own. They are pesky, those blind spots. They are hidden away. So how can you find them? Well, you need someone else to support you and help you identify them. And you know what it's like. You don't know about something in your blind spot forever, your entire life. And then all of a sudden, somebody points it out to you, and then it is all that you can see. It's like when I used to do a lot of public speaking, and I used to use a lot of words such as and ah. And somebody would say that to me. And then, of course, all I could hear myself was saying was and ah. Do you relate to that? Yes or no? Yes. Right. So basically, being the best version of yourself involves looking out for your blind spots. But we can't get away with ignoring them, even though we can't find them on our own, because they limit our way of seeing the world. Our blind spots do. Okay. So being the best version of yourself can, of course, lead to greater success, right? It can lead to increased satisfaction, time, money, better relationships. Don't you want increased satisfaction, time, money, and better relationships? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right, exactly. Is it enough to just want it?
No.
Right. It's like we all know about staying healthy. We all know that the key to being healthy is exercising and eating well. And yet, we don't do it. Why not? Why don't we do it? It's because there are probably, most likely, certain beliefs that we have fundamentally sitting in our blind spots that we're not even aware of, that is sabotaging the very goal that we want to get towards. So by getting the right structure support system in place, it allows you to say yes to yourself and to move past those pesky gremlins. So those of you listening, be prepared about a gift that I will offer at the end of this talk as well. So let's see what other people have said. So Miss K, and I am using initials to protect the privacy of various people. So Miss K, this example, already had a very, very successful career before we worked together. She had a very happy and fulfilled home life. She was active and healthy, and it seemed she was doing absolutely fine on the outside. She had plenty of experience leading and managing others. She was successful, and she had the respect of her peers. But when she came to me, she was also concerned and confused. She was in the middle of changing her career direction, and she was worried that she was heading along the wrong path. She felt as though she didn't quite belong, and it was starting to eat away at her self-confidence and her ability to speak up and lead like she used to. Through our journey together, she discovered what was really concerning her. She had spent so much time leading others that she wasn't able to spot it when she wasn't leading herself. Knowing that, she was able to step up to her leadership skills towards her own life and excel through and beyond what she thought was possible. Her next project, as a result, went on to win big awards, and she is now working at the company of her dreams, leading others successfully again. So what are some of the things we can do right now to become better leaders? Seeing as we have a limited amount of time together today, I will share 3 keys with you that you can take away right now. So do you want to know the keys? Yeah. Okay, counting down backwards from 3. Key number 3 is congruence. So what is congruence? Well, congruence is the alignment of our ideal self with our actual self. It's being true to who we really are. It's acting in accordance with our core values, and it's basically being the best version of ourselves. So what does it feel like when you're out of alignment? What does it feel like when you're not congruent? Well, in one of my early jobs, before I was promoted to lead the teams, I worked at a high-powered, big money consulting job. It's the kind of job where they gave you, what we call a golden handshake, money just for joining. They gave me a laptop. I was wearing suits. They were paying for my travel expenses to go and work on client sites. They were putting me up in fancy hotels. I expensed dinners every night, worked with a great team. All the markers of success, and I did everything that, I thought my parents would want. And yet, deep down, I didn't really want to spend the time doing these things. I was making all of this money, but you know what? I was also drinking like a fish. I hope my mother isn't watching this. I've just realized. I was unhappy, but I didn't really know why. After all, I was doing all the things I told would lead to success and happiness. And there I was, sitting in a hotel room on my own, miserable. Sure, I was happy on the outside, but inside, I felt empty. You know you're out of alignment when you have those feelings, but you may not be able to identify exactly what it is or why you are feeling that way. So, in order to get alignment, which is the alignment of your ideal self with your actual self, you have to know what your ideal self is. And so that starts by getting clear on your values. So here are some tips for how great leaders utilize congruence. Great leaders are clear on their own values. They know what's important to them, and they behave in a way that aligns with them, so that wherever they go, it is obvious to those around them witnessing them that they are fully aligned with who they believe they want to be. Not only that, they know and care about their people's values, because everybody's values are different. One person on your team may enjoy and value joy, fun, humor. They may be the one who jokes around, takes everything really easily. They say everything is fine and great with a big grin, and yet they haven't still yet started that urgent task you asked them to do in the meeting last week. Okay. Now, another person on your team may value achievement, recognition, and pride. Perhaps they come across as being very serious at work. They're focused, they get to the point, they do not joke around. They start and finish their tasks, and they want to be acknowledged for it. Can you see how not knowing each of your team members' values could potentially lead to miscommunication, dissatisfaction, and disengagement? Yes or no? Yes. And how knowing their values and knowing your own can really help pull your team together? Does that make sense? With everyone having different values, it's really important for leaders to collaborate with each of their team members, not just on their individuals' values, but what it means for them to actually be a team together. So what we're talking about here is your team's values. You'll be surprised at the number of teams and leaders who don't take the time to really figure out what is important for them as a team. They have their goals, projections, and numbers they want to hit, but in terms of who they are being, as they are moving towards that goal, many of them have no idea. So as a result, everyone kind of acts in accordance to what they think is right, which sometimes doesn't jive with who they actually want to be. And that is what leads to dissatisfaction, acting out, and ultimately disengagement and resentment. So a great leader operationalizes and translates values from ideals to behaviors. They teach people the skills they need to show up in a way that is accountable, so that they can all stay aligned together and call each other out when they're not. So when it comes to being a great leader, actions speak louder than words. So it's important to make sure that you walk the talk or walk your walk, and to make sure your team understands what that looks like and what happens when you fall out of alignment. Another thing great leaders do is that they have a really clear and accurate image of not just their leadership style, but also, of course, of their own strengths and weaknesses. And this is where self-leadership really comes into play. They know where they shine and when they don't, and they have really effective strategies for compensating for these weaknesses. But they also understand that their greatest asset is actually the people around them. It's their team. Great leaders recognize that their team are living, breathing, complex, complicated human beings that you can't just see as walking numbers, or worse, walking dollar signs. Each of your team have unique strengths and weaknesses, and it is up to you as leaders to not only get to know what they are, but to embrace them, to nurture them, to encourage them to grow. Imagine if early on in your career, you had a leader who directly, overtly, and outwardly encouraged you and supported you to develop your skills and your strengths so that you could become the person you wanted to be. Would you have become more engaged with those particular people or jobs and projects? Yes or no?
Yes.
So great leaders, they learn and know what makes their people tick. They recognize their needs in the moment, and they adapt their leadership style accordingly. So instead of assuming that people will trust them, great leaders earn their trust by asking questions such as, what does support from me look like for you? So instead of assuming that they know how to support their team members, they ask them, how can I best support you right now, especially during times of challenge? During times of challenge, a lot of leaders by default, they kind of just shutter it down. They go into like high impact mode, and they just want to go, go, go. Those are some of the most critical times to really rally your team together. And the best way to do it is to ask those kind of open-ended questions. How can I best serve you today? Because leaders ultimately respect the fact that they are there to serve their team and not the other way around. So when Mr. D came to me, he just had a series of personal breakthroughs. It was fantastic for him. They were powerful, and he felt pretty great for a while. Like many people who came off intensive courses and breakthroughs, he really had a great vision of what he wanted for his life, but he struggled with keeping up with the momentum of getting there. Do any of you identify with that? Yeah. And he had some bad habits that he just couldn't shake. It was affecting his progress towards his visions and his goals, and he was frustrated and dissatisfied. Through working together, he actually got really clear on his values and how his thoughts and actions were completely out of sync with what was actually important to him. So as you can read from this testimonials, because he got so clear on his values, he was surprised he never did it before because they were so important to everything from problem solving to day-to-day decision making of what he actually wanted to invest his time and energy in. He's now taking bold steps in his relationships. He's embarked on training for a brand new high-level sporting event. And he's now confident in his decision-making and the direction in which he is taking all of these aspects of his life because he prioritizes what's important for him. And more importantly, he follows through and gets things done. He has congruence. When you become clear on your values and of what's important to those around you, working together becomes joyful, fulfilling, and easy. Don't you all want to work in teams where it's joyful, fulfilling, and easy?
Yes.
Right. If you want your team to trust and respect you, you have to trust and respect them first. When you make a mistake, you fess up. I've made my share of mistakes, including with the people in this photo, and yet we're all smiling, and I think they kind of like me. You don't get to sweep mistakes under the rug and hope they just go away because they never do. Instead, you share your mess with others because in those moments, you allow vulnerability. And in those moments of you being vulnerable, you say it's okay for others to not only make mistakes too, but they can also be vulnerable about it with you. So that allows for everybody to rise up together as a team, but also as individuals as well. Because when you and everyone acts within integrity, magical things happen. You have fun. You get great results. You look out for each other. You celebrate each other. And then the ripple effects come. So, are you ready for key number 2?
Yes.
Okay. Key number 2. The second key is confidence. Now, contrary to what you might think, confidence is not about how much you know about something. Now, that might be useful if you are talking about a particular topic, but in general, that kind of confidence comes and goes, just like your knowledge of a particular topic does. What I'm talking about here is real confidence, deep down, true confidence. It fundamentally boils down to self-confidence. Confident is the belief in oneself and one's ability to succeed. It's basically knowing that you have the ability to figure things out. That's what confidence is. So you ready for a tip about how great leaders utilize confidence?
Yes.
All right. Great leaders aren't afraid to have those conversations or say those things where the outcome is completely unknown. They learn and get good at being really honest. This includes being clear with their team, even though it might be difficult. It includes having tough conversations. You know, those kind of conversations we know we really need to have. It may not even be in the workplace. It could be the person we live with, and yet we're like, oh, we don't want to. Great leaders aren't afraid to have those conversations because they know what's waiting for them on the other side is more magical than what is suffering right now. Great leaders also are very good at saying, I don't know. Until you can admit that you don't know something, it is impossible to actually learn anything new. So even though many of us may feel as though we're all for learning and growth, unless you can confidently say, I don't know, you are not maximizing your potential to learn. And by asking, what do you think? Great leaders are actively inviting those around them to participate in the discussion with them. They are telling their people that they value their thoughts, their opinions, and their ideas. They are including people and telling them that their contribution matters. They know that more heads are better than just one. This, in turn, when you ask people to contribute to what's going on at work, means magically less work for you. Who here wants less work? Yes or no? Right. Sometimes as leaders, we find ourselves taking on quite a lot. We feel as though as leaders, it becomes our responsibility to sometimes bear the burden of the team's weight of responsibility. How many of you feel that as a leader, you sometimes take on a little bit more than you can probably handle? Yes, absolutely. The key to great leadership, though, is understanding that the power is in your team. And how you utilize that is by saying things like, what do you think? How can I best support you? So that instead of guessing, instead of you being the one having to come up with ideas and direction all the time, you utilize the power of your team, their creativity, their vision, and their values. And that's how you can start to make better decisions collectively and ease the amount of work on your own plate. So here's an example. On the outside, Mr. J looked like he had it all. He was young, single. He had a job he enjoyed that gave him great benefits. He owned his own home in Los Angeles. He had lots of financial investments that were doing really well. And he had many, many friends. So in many respects, he was living a very good life. And yet he was unfulfilled and kept feeling as though something was missing. He was constantly chasing after something to fill that gap and had been doing that for a number of years. Do any of you identify with that? Chasing after something, but you're not quite sure what? Yeah. It was exhausting him and frustrating him because no matter how he chased, the feelings were still there. So through working together, he was able to really get that he was enough. His self-love and self-respect began to skyrocket. And as a result, his confidence, which he hadn't even realized was lacking, came back. He moved towards dating again and doing lots of self-care. Now that he had that new appreciation of himself as a person who was worthy of love and good enough. And from there, he completely changed his living space around him to reflect who he wanted to be, and is now working towards a much larger vision of how to make a difference to a lot of people through starting a new business of his own. He finally feels at peace, as it says here. So here's another tip. It's probably no surprise that one of the tips here is about being flexible. We all know that in order to survive, we have to be adaptable. We know that change is inevitable. And yet many leaders are surprisingly not very good at changing how they lead depending on who they're leading. So a number of people who I speak to about leadership, they say something similar. I'm great at leading in only certain situations. I have difficult people on my team, Louise, people who just do not listen to me. They just don't do as I say, and they're a nightmare to lead. They're just difficult people. So here's another way of looking at it that I invite you to consider. There are no difficult people. Okay, nobody threw anything at me, just to let the online audience know. So, okay, I think that landed okay. But I invite you to really look at it that way. When you go to work tomorrow, the next time you talk to somebody who you before viewed as being difficult, I invite you to consider seeing them as just being who they are and not being difficult or negative or pessimistic, whatever label you wish. Because until we are able to see our fellow human being as somebody who is incredible, has wonderful ideas, really wants to help and do their very best, we will never be able to truly lead others in the way that we really can. So I invite you to consider the next time you meet somebody who kind of riles you up a little bit or pushes a few recognizable buttons in you, to just take a moment and acknowledge that, be compassionate with yourself for feeling that way, but then just to see them as the possibility of being the very person, unique human individual that is standing in front of you in that moment, and see what happens. So being adaptable and flexible is absolutely key. And being able to deal with anybody in any situation is so important. It can be dealing with somebody who looks like this, all the way to dealing with somebody who looks like this. Everybody is wonderful and amazing. Okay, repeat after me. Everyone is wonderful and amazing.
Everyone is wonderful and amazing.
All right. Let's share another story. So Miss A realized this when she worked with me. When she came to me, she had recently finished an incredibly difficult project which burnt her out and she lost her mojo. She lost all possible way of showing flexibility and adaptability because she was tapped out. So this is another thing to be aware of. When we want to show love to another human being, we need to be full. We don't have any reserves. We can't give everything to anybody else. So she was really struggling with stress and trauma from that project. And it wasn't just impacting her career, as you can imagine, it was impacting all areas of her life. She felt so disconnected from her partner at home, who was heartbroken. She didn't want to spend time with her friends anymore because she felt so exhausted all the time. And she really didn't know what to do. You could hear it in her voice. She really thought she was going to be stuck there for a long time. Through working together, she got that she was way more powerful than she realized. She got that the way she saw her project could shift. And when she shifted it, she saw her entire experience as something coming from a world of possibility instead of the world of the ordinary. She tapped back into her passion and has not only discovered what her passions were and how to reignite them, but she has now discovered new passions, new joy in her life. And boy, oh boy, have there been ripple effects. Her partner and her, solid, absolutely solid. She's now embarking on a new career. She recently got a new job. She started a whole bunch of new hobbies. And she wrote to me recently saying, you know what, Louise, I've reached out to a lot of people I haven't been in touch with for years, and it's been amazing. I have now started new activities such as drawing and painting, and it is now opening up a whole new side of me. And she even said, you know what, I think I might sign up for like an improv class or something, really pushing out her creativity. So one of the most important things leaders can do is to understand the need for safety in their team. And I don't just mean physical safety, which of course is absolutely paramount. What I mean is emotional safety, mental safety. Because when you think about it, the world in general is full of things that happen to us and full of things that we can't control. Potentially, they could completely derail us at any given moment in time. In order for us to really work cohesively as a team to manage things like competition, changing and advancing technology, and also just people leaving and coming and differences in opinions, we need to band together to understand what is going on externally, which means that we cannot be expending our energy managing what is going on internally. So great leaders understand the importance of creating safety for their team. They know that it is absolutely paramount for every single member of their team to feel as though they are safe in the workplace. And what do we mean by that? Well, what could potentially make somebody not feel safe in the workplace? Well, it's probably behaviors you may know of. It may even be behavior you've experienced yourself. Things such as bullying, gossiping, right? Prejudice even, and potentially very negative abusive behavior. All of that leads to individuals feeling as though they have to protect themselves at work every day. And if you have been in that situation, you know how exhausting that can be. Because when you spend all your energy looking out for yourself and only yourself, you are not spending that energy really bringing your best to work. You are not doing the best that you can, and that leads to ultimate disengagement and unfulfillment. So managers and leaders, they really encourage safety. And the way they do that is they embed that within their own culture. So there is zero tolerance for anything that does not lead to safety. But they also make sure every single team member knows what it is like to have their team members back. You've probably heard of the Spartans, the Spartan army, who are from Sparta. Yeah, they were some of the most well-respected army back in ancient Greece. In fact, some of you may even know the movie 300, which depicted one of the massive battles against the Persian army. So the Spartans really understood the value of safety within teams. And here's an example. Every soldier within the Spartan army carried a helmet and a chest plate. If a soldier lost their helmet or their chest plate, there was no punishment for them. But if they, for some reason, abandoned or lost their shield, they could potentially lose their citizenship. The answer and the reason is really quite simple. When it comes to being in the Spartan army, when it comes to defending and attacking, your helmet and your chest plate protects only you. Your shield, on the other hand, protects the entire line. So as you can imagine, if there was one shield lost, the entire team could fall almost immediately. Great leaders understand the need for safety within the team, because when each of your team members feel safe, then they can actually start to look outward at what is going on in the world, how to make it a better place, and to just keep an eye on any threats that may be coming their way. So Mr. J had used a number of self-development tools and coaches before, and he'd had some so-so experiences with some of them. So he was understandably a little bit skeptical with what coaching can do for him, and some of you may have experienced that too. So when he and I started working together, he had just made a really bold move that involved a huge investment in a new company. Now he was faced with becoming the kind of leader he always wanted to be. Now, he had worked alone for many, many years, over 20 years. So even though he had good self-leadership, he had forgotten what it meant to actually really need to inspire others. Not only that, but the company that he had just bought and the team he had just inherited had a phenomenal leader before him. His predecessor was very well admired and very well respected. How was Mr. J going to step into those shoes? So through our journey of working together, he got reconnected to the impact he wants to have on his world, his vision. And he also really tapped into his resources and strengths and understood the value of creating safety for his team. You can imagine, as an employee, the company's just been bought by a new owner. Many of you may have experienced that in your own employment, being bought by a new owner, and some of the trepidation, uncertainties that can involve. So he knew that the number one thing that he needed to instill for his team was the feeling of safety. Because if there was any underlying feeling of an employee not feeling safe, not feeling certain about the future of their job, then he knew that no matter what he shared with them in terms of vision would never be heard. So that's what he did. He got in touch with his leadership skills and strength. He created a sense of safety at the very first meeting where he brought all of his team together. And as a result, they actually jumped on board with his new vision almost immediately. In fact, when I spoke to him last week, he said that he had just signed on a record number of new customers and he was having the best month ever. And we were hardly halfway through the month. So it's pretty incredible. Are you ready for the number one key? Yep. All right. Number one key is curiosity. As Albert Einstein said, the important thing is to never stop questioning, never lose a holy curiosity, he said. Great leaders stay curious. They are curious about themselves, but they are even more curious about you. It keeps their mind active instead of passive. They're more observant of new ideas, so you will get more ideas from other people if you ask more questions. And it actually brings more excitement into life in general, right? And that's in fact why you are all here tonight. You are curious. You're curious about how to become a better leader. You're curious about meeting new people. So it's the very essence of self-discovery and self-growth. So great leaders, they know that one of the key skills that they can bring to their team is actually coaching. Now, some of you may be familiar with a workshop that I run called The Power of Coaching. And that is where I go through the 8 key elements of coaching and how to bring them as a manager and a leader to your team to bring out the best in people. One of those key skills is asking lots of questions. Earlier in this talk, we talked about you asking your team how they actually want to be supported instead of assuming. Another way to do this is to ask them exactly what's going on for them. There was a situation where in one of the jobs that I had, I was on a client call with my team. I deferred the answering of a question that my client had to one of my team members. And instead of answering in a natural, normal way, he just exploded. He was incredibly short with the client. He basically almost shut down the idea, calling it a terrible idea. You know how sometimes we think clients have terrible ideas, but we should never say it out loud. He actually said it out loud. And so it was so abrupt that I thought, okay, I need to do a little bit of collateral damage with this. And then we ended the call. Now, before a lot of self-development and self-awareness work, I probably would have responded in a way that involved me marching down the stairs to see him and then basically yelling at him. In fact, that might be behavior that some of you may recognize from either your past or even right now. But as I was walking down those stairs to go and see him, I realized that there was another way. I didn't want to make an enemy of him. I wanted to see him for the possibility of who he was. So as I went down those stairs and I saw him, instead of towering over him as he sat and I stood, I pulled up an empty chair and sat with him. So I was literally at the same level as him. And when I looked him in the eye, instead of saying, what was that all about? I said to him, hey, are you okay? And the look on his face, he was completely disarmed. You could tell. He expected me, probably by the way I stomped down the stairs, to be mad at him and angry at him. And I'll tell you, I'll be honest, part of me was. Part of me was angry and mad at him. Part of me thought that we had screwed it up with the client on that client call. Part of me was embarrassed because I thought he made me look bad. But by setting that aside, by opening up the opportunity for him to actually share what was going on, he actually did say to me, well, Louise, I'm actually really sorry for what I said on that call, but I've had a really tough morning. I had a really big argument with my girlfriend, and I'm worried that she's not going to be there when I get home tonight. And so when he shared that with me, you can imagine how relieved I was that I didn't go down and say, hey, what was that all about? Because it's recognizing the humanity in us all that allows us to really connect in the way that we need to if we are going to make the world a better place. Coaching as a skill works. In fact, recent research shows that leaders coaching led to improvements in productivity, engagement, and customer service. So one study reported that coaching led to an increase in output from 35% to greater than 100% within 12 months. And another reported improved customer satisfaction survey results in a customer service team from 0 to 450% within 5 months of implementing coaching as a habit for the leaders and managers with the teams that they're working with. So it works. Another thing great leaders do is that they're not afraid to ask the big questions of themselves and of the people around them. Questions about life, who they are, what they want. When I spoke in Mexico City a few years ago, I spoke to over 200 people. And one of the questions that I asked them was, what do you want for your career? It seems like such a almost mundane, natural question, right? What do you want for your career? A question that many of you have probably asked yourself at one point. But what was interesting was after the talk, a number of people came up to me and they said to me, you know what, Louise? I've asked myself that question a number of times, and I've been asked that question a number of times. But after listening to you talk, I realized that I never actually really found the answer. How many of you can identify with that, with some of life's biggest questions? You ask yourself, but really have you gotten to the bottom of it? So by talking with them and by asking questions, by being curious about them, they manage to discover the answers for themselves in the same way you can too. So by coaching your team members, by being curious, by actively listening to them, by asking questions, by building rapport with them, you encourage them to look at life differently and look at their own potential differently. And when you can get your team members inspired by their own potential, I can tell you anything is possible. So often we go through life thinking that our beliefs, which are often very limiting and untrue, are actually true. They are what's so. Sometimes our beliefs are so ingrained in us over the years that they become our reality and we can't see beyond that. And great leaders are able to assist the people around them to realize that it's just not true. So when Ms. H came to me, she'd been struggling quite a lot at work. She felt undervalued and frustrated, and she was becoming more and more disengaged. She was even contemplating her future there and wondering whether she actually wanted to leave and potentially look for a different opportunity. She was absolutely terrified of being perceived as the person who rocked the boat. You know, the person who spoke up, the person who said, I don't think I agree with that. Or the person who said, that doesn't work for me. She had spent years nurturing this underlying belief that she had without actually being fully aware. She was always the one who wanted to go along with the crowd and not make trouble. During our time together, she got really curious and saw how this limiting belief was not just impacting the way she saw her job, but it was impacting her life in general. And as a result, she got so aligned with who she wanted to be and so inspired by who she could be that she took an exceptionally bold move. She asked for what she wanted. She got what she wanted. And she's now on a completely different project and absolutely loving it. So it just goes to show that when we are curious about what we think is true and find out that there is another way, that it opens up a whole new world of possibility for who we can be and how we can contribute to the world. So great leaders also understand that all leaders need leaders. So a lot of, if you are leading and in a leadership role, you know what that sometimes takes. Being a great leader, you may be an overachiever. You also may be overly critical about themselves. Who here can identify with being an overachiever or being overly critical about themselves? Yes or no? Yes. Right. And also, it can be lonely to be a leader, especially as entrepreneurs. Many of you may work alone or with a relatively small team. Sometimes it feels as though the weight of all of the success of your business lies only on your shoulders. That can be incredibly daunting and very overwhelming. So leaders also can, if they are working alone and not cohesively with their team and others, they can get stuck in a rut. Sometimes we just use familiar behavior and patterns over and over again, and we don't understand how limiting they can be. So making changes, especially changes that involve a big leap of faith in your life, such as starting a new business, breaking through your business to get your best month ever, turning around your team from completely dysfunctional to getting the results that you want and you know your team can get, they take a lot of work and a lot of challenge. And the best leaders know they don't have to do it alone. And not only that, they can't do it alone. So what do? They get structured systems and support. So they deeply understand and respect the fact that all leaders have great leaders. I mean, an obvious example is in sports. Right? Every top level sports person has their own coach. Even when an athlete is at the very top of their game, they still turn to their coach because they recognize that it's a mental game as much as a physical game, and that a great coach supports you with growing and evolving both. I mean, can you imagine Serena Williams or Michael Phelps or Wayne Gretzky with no coach standing along the sidelines, watching, observing, supporting, and coaching them? We can't imagine that. So it's not just sports people either. Many highly successful and ambitious business people seek out coaching because they recognize the value they get from it. Even the toughest of leaders, even the hardiest of CEOs need to blow off steam, quite frankly. And it's always good to have an unbiased person to which you can do that. Now, the key thing is that great leaders also recognize that leaders don't arrive. And what I mean by that is that leadership is not a destination. As we mentioned earlier, leadership is a way of being. It is a way of leading yourself, of being in the world, making decisions and following through. So what this means is that they understand that leadership is forever. It's perennial. It's forever growing and evolving. As Stephen Covey said in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it is really important to sharpen your saw regularly. Recent studies have actually shown that in terms of corporate environments, for every $1 a company invests in executive coaching, their return is well over $7. That is incredibly high return. That's almost 8 times the original investment. So it works, and people are investing in it. So leaders understand the power of investing in themselves, and they understand the need that they have to grow if they are expecting those around them to grow as well. So when I first met Miss R, she was new to the city and in fact to this country. She had just left home for the first time, and she was really struggling to find her place in this new world and in a new career. What she really got present to and her insights was actually that she didn't have to do it on her own, even though she felt desperately alone. She understood how to tap into her potential to connect with others, to be with others, and what it took to actually build rapport and relationship with others. So she got in touch with her courage, her compassion, her commitment, and she is now actively leading teams, passionately and really well, and actually doing work that she only once dreamed of doing a while ago. So life's purpose is why you are here on the planet. It's why you are here today as entrepreneurs. Who you are moved to be, what you are moved to create. Your purpose serves as a reminder of who you are and the impact you naturally create in the world. When you are living your purpose, your life is fulfilling, it's effortless and satisfying. Do you want your life to be fulfilling, effortless, and satisfying? Yes or no? Yes. When you are inspired to build and lead a team of people in your company, or whether on your own with others working with you as JV partners, or whether you dream of having that solo business that impacts the world immediately, leadership of yourself and of others is the key skill to have. And it's not just about you. It's not just even for you. Think of the ripple effects. Think of a time when you were under great leadership. Or in fact, think of a time where you just saw great leadership from afar. Think about how that influenced you. Because when you shine, you give others permission to shine too. When you're at your best, you give others space and inspiration to step into them being their best. It's like that phrase, lead by example. So just think of the ripple effects if you were to achieve your life's purpose. Who would be impacted? Who would benefit? What kind of a difference might that make? What might be possible for the world? The world needs great leaders like you. So I'll tell you another little secret. Leadership is not just about leadership in the workplace. We spoke about volunteering and communities and things like that. But for me, I have a personal story about leadership. So at some point in my life, I was facing a crisis, not in the workplace, but in my personal life. I had just moved here, and I moved here with my then partner. Within a short period of time of being here, he and I decided to break up. It was a very amicable separation and divorce, but still, I was absolutely devastated, heartbroken, and completely empty. I didn't know what to do. I was in a new country. I was effectively now on my own. Do I stay? Do I leave? What do I do? This time, though, I learned from my previous mistakes. Did I do it on my own? No, I went and got support. And so what I did was I hired a coach to help me get through it. And as a result, I rediscovered who I actually was, because I never took the time to do that when I was in my 20s, believe it or not. And because I knew who I was, I could start to actually love myself for the first time in my life. And what that then enabled me to do was to actually find the love of my life. And that's what happened. I found the love of my life, and a year ago, we got married. So leadership isn't just about what you can do in the workplace. It's not just about the difference you can make to the people working in a team around you or in your business. Leadership is about your life. It's about showing up to be the person you really were meant to be. It's about finding and getting fulfillment in all aspects of your life. It's about really living into your potential. So I invite you one last time. Imagine a world where waking up each morning inspires you and you're able to be and do your very best every day. This is my vision, and I am passionate about supporting you in achieving your potential, which is why I am super excited to give you a gift today. The gift I'm going to give you, and to you as well online, is you are going to receive privately with me a free one-on-one kick-ass leader strategy session. How about that? Yeah. So if you go to louiselee.com, you'll see where to go to answer a few questions. So if you are watching online, please go there and you can apply now. During our session together, you will get crystal clear on where you're at and what you want for your life. And I'll share with you some strategies, some keys, some information that will help you get exactly what you want out of your session with me. So I'm really excited to give you this today, and I'm really looking forward to working with you, because we are all here to make a difference, and I am passionate about you making the difference in your life and in others. So go out, be bold, create positive experiences with everybody you meet, and don't stop until you find out who you truly are and realize that potential. Thank you.
Louise, on behalf of VPN, we thank you for sharing this plethora of bits of wisdom with us. And I also have to thank our friends at TELUS for making the reproduction of this video possible. Thank you, TELUS. Thank you, TELUS.
Thank you, TELUS.
Here you go. Thank you, TELUS. Way to go, TELUS. Thank you.